Good evening, and welcome to the Citizens Participation Meeting for proposed new housing project. I assume you got the postcard. Tonight I have the development team with me, representatives of the ownership group, the architectural group, and the civil engineering group. The civil engineering group is out putting his convertible top up, but he'll be back. And we will explain the project and solicit questions and comments, and that's part of the process for moving forward with any new project in the city of Ann Arbor. Make sure you sign in with the sign-in sheet up on the ledge there. Because we're required to take attendance as proof that we actually complied with the city regulations and held this meeting. As I said, the meeting is to give you an opportunity to review what we're doing and ask questions and provide comments, feedback that could be incorporated as we move forward with the project. I'm going to kind of give you the 40,000 foot view of the process and where we are in the process. Yes?
Could you start with your name, please?
My name is Brad Moore.
Thank you.
Then different team members will take over for me to explain different elements of the project. I'm a local architect, lived in Ann Arbor since 1977, built my practice here, and have engaged in a number of projects of varying sizes all over town. And we have another architect involved in the project, the lead design architect. The last project that we collaborated on, ESG Architects and myself, is about ready for occupancy behind the Michigan Theater. It's called Legacy. So this is another opportunity to do some wonderful architecture in Ann Arbor. As to the process and where we are, we're at the very beginning of the process in crafting the project. The city requires that as soon as we have a concept, we show the concept to a citizens group, solicit questions and comments, continue to refine the design, and then once that design has been refined, submit to the planning department for the required site plan and rezoning if necessary. In this case, it would involve a rezoning as well as a site plan application. That will initiate a review process within the city. All the different departments of the city will review the project. That includes the utilities department, the fire department, the police department, the solid waste department, engineering. There's at least 15 departments that will proffer comments on the project and push it in different directions. And we'll go through an iterative process of responding to those staff comments, redesigning, resubmitting, getting a new set of comments, changing the plans, resubmitting, until staff feels that we have a project that could then be put before the planning commissions. During that staff review process, citizens can take a look at the plans that are being submitted on a web portal the city has created called Stream. If you go to the city's website, a2gov.org, and you search on Stream, you'll find a link to that portal. And you can type in the address. In this case, the address that this is being done under is 558 South 5th Street. And then that will pull up a page dedicated to that project, and then you can see all the submissions and all the staff comments as they're made. So it's a fully open and transparent process. You can, in reviewing those documents, also submit comments to the planning staff. So there's an opportunity for engagement during the staff review process. Once the staff review process is completed, it will be scheduled for a hearing at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will hold that public hearing and review comments made at that public hearing. And then they will begin a deliberative process evaluating the proposal that's before them. And they may vote on moving that process forward or asking for more changes. But eventually, it will be recommended on to City Council. City Council will also have a public hearing, and then they will make a final decision. So the final decision on this one is at City Council because a rezoning is being requested. So there's plenty of opportunity, starting here, going through the staff review process, going through the public hearing processes of both planning commission and city council for public input into the project. That's kind of an overview of the process, and we're at the very, very, very beginning stages of the process. With me here tonight are the ownership group, and will be able to answer some of your questions, hopefully. And then two people from ESG Architects will present where we are in crafting the organization of the project. We'll ask if you could hold the comments or questions till the end. We can always backtrack on the slides and go back to places that people want us to review in depth later. But if we can get everybody to get a holistic picture of everything and then come back and deal with the questions and the details, we found that works best. So I'll turn it over now to ESG or Steve.
Sure. Thank you, Brad. Good evening. Thank you everyone for coming and participating in the meeting tonight. My name is Steve Burrell. I'm the Chief Development Officer with GMH Communities. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give you a little bit about the background on GMH, essentially talk briefly about who we are, what we do, and then I'm going to turn it to my colleague Sean Gallagher just to run through a brief list of recent projects that we think have some similarities with the project that we're proposing here that we'd like to show you. Maybe a little hard to read the screen, and I'm not going to read from it, but I'll start by saying that GMH is a family-owned company that specializes in the acquisition, development, and management of quality market-rate multifamily and student housing communities throughout the entire United States. We just celebrated our 40th year in business, and some of call it just the major milestones we've achieved is having owned and operated almost 250 properties throughout our history, 41,000 multifamily units, that includes conventional multifamily and military housing units, and 91,000 purpose-built student housing beds throughout the history of the company. The majority of our executive team, including myself, has been with the firm for 25 years and beyond that. I just hit my 25th year anniversary, so there is a lot of experience and tenure on the team. The company has a strong track record, a very strong balance sheet, and the ability to execute projects like you're going to see tonight from the very start and inception of site selection all the way through construction and development, and then maybe more importantly, operations and management. I mentioned earlier, we're a manager. We manage all of the properties that we develop, and we do it for the long term. We're not a merchant builder. We don't build and sell. We build and we operate, and the folks that are employed on site will be employees of GMH Communities. I neglected to mention that we're based in suburban Philadelphia. This is a current map of the properties that we own. Again, some small kind of dots, but it's meant to just show the breadth of the experience, that we are coast to coast, that we are national. And on the right side, we've listed some of our university partners. This is a list of current properties and current partners. If we were to go back through the entire history of the company and include all of our partners and all of the properties owned in markets, we've been in most of the major university markets throughout the country. In fact, we used to own student housing here in Ann Arbor, serving University of Michigan. We don't today. We're optimistic and hopeful that the community, the town, will like the project we're proposing, and that we'll end up delivering it and hopefully getting a Michigan logo here on the map. That's currently not here. I also just want to mention that one of the reasons we put these logos here is that we view our university that we serve, whether we are on campus or off campus, and we do both, but we view them very much as partners, and we understand that the partnerships extend beyond just our university partners and our actual investment partners, but they extend to other stakeholders, specifically the neighbors, the municipality, the businesses nearby. We want to be good stewards. We, again, view ourselves as being here for the long term. We want to add value to the neighborhood. We want to listen. And again, we want to be good neighbors, good partners. And I hope that kind of comes through as we talk a little bit more tonight, show you this proposed project, and hopefully answer questions maybe a bit more about our history and other projects. I'm going to turn to Sean just to run through about the 5 recent projects that, again, we think might illustrate what we're looking to accomplish here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Again, my name is Sean Gallagher with GMH Communities. I'm going to quickly run through a handful of our recently completed projects here to show you here tonight. The first here, Academy 65. This is located in Sacramento, California. Serves Sacramento State University, 305 bedrooms. Next on the list here is the Dean Reno, located in Reno, Nevada. It serves the University of Nevada at Reno. That is the flagship university of the state of Reno. That project is a little over 770 beds. Nova U City Square on the other side, the East Coast in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That serves graduate level students from Drexel University, University of Pennsylvania. That is just over 500 bedrooms. Nova Aggie Square, back to Sacramento, California. A recently completed project, 190 units, and that serves the UC Davis Medical School, which is located in Sacramento, California. A couple of the other recently completed ones, 2 towers in downtown Phoenix. The first, Nova Central Station, serves Arizona State University, and that is just over 400 units, and that we just received our temporary certificate of occupancy 2 weeks ago. The neighboring tower, the Mave, again, Arizona State University. This property here, it's situated on 2.5 acres. We have a partnership, a 99-year land lease with the city of Phoenix. So Steve touched about our partnerships with municipalities. This is a long-term arrangement we have with the city of Phoenix here. And excited about this one. It's just finishing up now. And we didn't want to take a lot of time tonight, but just show a couple of the recently completed projects that we've done at GMH. So thank you, everyone. And I've hand it over to ESG and Neil.
Yeah, I'm just going to briefly introduce our design team. Brad already introduced who we are. My name is Neil Reardon with ESG Architecture and Design. We are a firm that operates nationally and does a lot of the same work that Sean was just talking about. We have different projects and different things, but I've worked here in Ann Arbor before with Mr. Moore, and looking forward to an exciting project that we can show you some images of tonight. My colleague Theo will present those here in a moment. But we're a 100% firm. We do our interior design in addition to architecture, and then we work with folks like Scott, our civil engineering partners, to deliver the project on behalf of the development team at GMH Communities. So we're going to get into some project details here tonight. Again, we want to just remember to hold the questions. We want to allow plenty for time for question and answer after Theo rolls through some of the design imagery. But I'll first let Theo just introduce the site. You all live here, you know the site, but we're just going to level set it a little bit so everyone's familiar with the exact parameters of the site itself, and then thus you can be really informed of the proposal we're going to put in front of you with some of the design images at the end of the presentation. So hold tight, those are at the end, and I'll turn it over to Theo. Thank you. Start off.
My name is Theo Grothy. I'm an architect at ESG. Working on this project. Like Neil said, we're going to start off kind of flipping through a number of images fairly quickly just to show you where the site is and how it fits into the city as a whole and some of the infrastructure that already exists here. So outlined in red is where our site is. It's between 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue on East Madison Street. It's right north of the new Elbel Fields, and everything shown in yellow is University of Michigan owned and operated property. Also of note, G and H are new undergraduate student housing projects that are currently moving forward. G is currently under construction, and H is, you probably, if you've been around that neighborhood, seen the fence. They've purchased the property and they're starting to do some remediation on the sites. So some fairly large projects by the University of Michigan.
I'm
sorry, sir, but that's not correct. What is that yellow area to the right of the red box?
That is University of Michigan.
It's the Perry. Must be the Perry.
That's the Perry building?
It's the Perry building.
Okay, where's Fifth Avenue then?
Fifth Avenue is right here. Sorry, I can't really point with the pointer.
Right hand side of the red.
Yeah.
You need a pointer.
So that's
Yeah, it is.
We have the laser,
Wish I did.
but it
Where's the
doesn't
laser
work on,
button?
it doesn't work on the
Right.
flat screen.
It's just hard to tell without the street labels.
Yeah, we'll get a little tighter in on,
Yep.
on some future things, and we'll point that out. So.
Yeah. As far as existing infrastructure that occurs in the city, we're pretty well situated in a nice location that has connection to existing bus routes, proposed bus routes by the University of Michigan, as well as existing bike routes and proposed bike routes, and the tree line trail. You can see our red square on the tree line trail is very close to that proposed site, or that trail that goes all the way through. And if we go back just one, next to D and G, they've already started building some of that trail called the Wolverine Path or Wolverine Trail, right along the old, oh, there you go, yeah. You can see the cursor. So very, very close access to some of those amenities that the city is proposing.
Is that trail the railroad track?
It is, part of it is, yeah.
That's correct.
The trail parallels adjacent to the track in several places.
I think I can do it from here so far. All right. And then this map shows just some of the proposed development zones by the University of Michigan. And again, we're kind of right in one of the corners. Yeah, to your point, that's the Perry building, just to the right of our red box.
What, I mean, is there a color code there, or what are we looking at?
Are you looking at the footprint of the building there in brown, where my cursor is? That's the Perry building itself. So.
No, I mean, the whole map, what, you said these are all sites under development.
Yeah.
This is kind of a master plan by the University of
How
Michigan.
many
Just
of them are already University of Michigan, how many are proposed to be acquired by, or what is it?
I believe this is all already owned by the University of Michigan.
It's already on.
Yeah.
Yep. All the colored areas are property owned by the university.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Just a few images that we took around our site of some of the existing buildings that more or less match the scale and size of our building that we're gonna be proposing and showing you. And then these are a couple of images very close to where our site is. So at the bottom, 4th and Madison and 5th and Madison. And then to the left, 5th and Hill, that's one of the new undergraduate housing projects that is going on. You can actually see it in the background of the top image. It's kind of the green and brown.
It's the one that's under construction back.
Correct. And then everything north of that in blue is something that they've just completed their purchase on, and they're starting their demo and remediation on those. So now we're zooming in a little bit. This is our proposed site plan showing how our building sits on the piece of property that we're going to purchase. So 4th on the left-hand side and 5th on the right-hand side, and then we front Madison at the south end. So in the dark gray areas, right where it says resident amenity, that's a 2 to 4 story or 2 to 3 story structure that sits on the property. And then the light gray is 12 stories, or an additional 10 stories that go up from there, just north of El Bell Field.
Yeah, and one thing we wanted to point out on this particular slide is just where we're proposing the curb cuts. You'll see these in later imagery,
Yep.
but there are several curb cuts on the site right now. We're reducing the number of those for this proposal. We have one at the northwest side, which is service and trash oriented. We have one that's auto exit and entry for visitors and residents, and then a specific resident one on Madison. And then the one on 5th is just an exit only for a drop-off to come underneath the building. One of the things we want to do, and you'll see this in later pieces, is we want to get the traffic off the street and handle some of that internally in terms of especially drop-offs and service-oriented things. Better for those not to take place and clunk up the street.
Deliveries as well, so.
Yeah.
So what will happen on Fifth Avenue?
Fifth Avenue,
It's exit only.
exit only, yep. So a car or a truck would enter on 4th Avenue, they would drive straight through, and we can show this in plan, but then they can only exit onto 5th Avenue. Nobody can enter onto 5th Avenue.
Are you committed to 12 stories?
Yes, we are, yep.
We can get into a little bit of that. I think it behoove us to get through all the images
Yeah.
so you can see those, and we'd love to have questions like that at the end.
So top left is our lowest level, and you can see the three curb cuts on that image times out with the grading that happens at both Madison and 4th. So
You say lowest level, ground level?
ground level, yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah.
the site has a significant amount of topography from the upper right-hand corner of the site in this orientation to the lower left-hand corner, a little over a story of height in the slope across that diagonal dimension. So we're tucking the lowest level parking into that slope. So whereas it will be at that grade on the 4th Avenue side, it's below grade on 5th Avenue.
Yep. So one story up then on the plan at the lower left, that's where that exit only out onto 5th Street. So that's one level up, and then that times out with 5th.
So where does it exit onto Fifth?
That is right there between the 2nd and 3rd tree on the right
Right here. So the way to summarize this nice and succinctly is the east side of the site times out with 5th Street, and the west side of the site times out with 5th. And Madison, it changes between the two. So the basement is call it the basement for lack of a better term, is in the lower left, or is in the upper left.
Yep.
And the first floor, what we're calling level 1, is in the lower left.
So which one of these is, the upper one or the lower one is on the screen? Which one is the lower and upper?
The lowest level is the one I'm highlighting right here, and I'll call that, I'm sorry, the lowest one is the one I'm highlighting right here, and we'll call that the P1 level. That's this label right here. This one that I'm highlighting right here is level 1. And again, this is the one that syncs with 5th.
I can't see your light. Can you use upper left, lower right, or whatever to describe it?
Yep.
Okay.
The upper left is the basement P1 level. That coincides with 4th and Madison. The one on the right is 5th, right here, and that's level 1. This is
So
in the lower
people
level.
enter at the lower level and exit at the upper level?
Yeah,
Correct,
good question.
yeah.
They do. So what happens is you'd enter low and you'd slowly rise up, and at a midpoint in this area right here, where I'm highlighting, you're about halfway, and then you exit at the higher level. That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was much of a grade change between 4th and
Yeah, when you're out on the site and you're standing on Madison, you don't perceive it, but particularly there is a great increase on 5th itself.
I think we're talking
20-some feet overall. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so we have some imagery as we get a little further along. What we can do is just highlight the upper levels of the level 2 here. We have this amenity pool deck zone, and you see common area here is interior building that's amenity and resident oriented but shared. And then the orange pieces you see here are dwelling units. And then a typical floor right here, levels 3 through 12, looks like that footprint. So.
Part of this that we want to highlight is just some of the community benefits that come along with the development like this. I'm not going to go through and read all of this stuff, but we've listed it out into 5 different categories, such as housing, transportation, some of the natural features that we're going to bring to the site, an economic benefit by increasing the tax base, and then this will be a sustainable building. All right, so now we're going to get into some imagery. This is what y'all came to see. This is looking north from above the south end of campus, just looking straight north. Main part of campus is in the upper right-hand corner of the image. Downtown is in the middle top of the image. And then our site is kind of middle center right there with that arrow. So that's our building sitting right there. Bell Field is just south of that. And then blocking diagrams of what those new undergraduate housing units look like just to the right of those. So we don't really know necessarily what those look like, that especially the north one, but wanted to give an idea of what that would look like.
So those gray things have not been built yet?
The southern one is under construction currently. The northern one has not been built yet. That's correct.
Do you know how tall they will be?
There have been no plans released for the northern ones, the ones that are being built over the area bounded by Division 5th, Madison, and Hill. The one that's under construction currently, there are some elements that are 5 stories, some elements that are 6 stories. There's been no public release of that.
So why aren't you building something that is consistent with that? Because you're jumping ahead when the zoning is not appropriate.
We can answer.
So
Yeah.
you're gonna get a lot of pushback on this.
Sure.
And you already did, like with the Moravian. Those of you who come from out of town, you don't know the history of this site. So you really should know, just in case I have to leave before the end, you're walking into a minefield of neighborhood opposition because you're trying to jump ahead of the zoning change. And you're going way higher than what the other buildings are. Some of those even that you showed, like the university's extension of the Perry building, all those dorms. So those of you who think you're coming from out of town, from your nice architectural firm, who got these built around the country, you don't know how well organized. I'm the president of the Germantown Neighborhood Organization, so I know what I'm talking about. This is going to be a big fight for you.
Ma'am, they asked us to hold questions till the end. I'd like to see the presentation. Thank you.
That wasn't a question.
Yeah, then you're disrupting the meeting and you can leave.
Yeah, we'd like to show you the full presentation,
Yeah.
and then we're happy to take comments and questions for the time being after we get through that.
So here we are at the southwest, looking northeast at the project. To the left is a University of Michigan-owned building, houses a number of different offices. One of them is public safety. We are, it's a pretty nice building. It's a really nice brick building that has some good proportion and size to it. So in our design currently, we are showing some respect for that building by trying to match some of the proportion and design with our base. And then really opening up the south end of our building to Bell Field, since that's a very nice, beautiful, big, open field. We're now at the southeast, looking northwest. To the bottom left is Bell Field. On the south end at our base, we are proposing kind of a front porch style amenity for our residents. And we can get into that a little bit, but that's really a way to connect our building to the public way along Madison, as well as the public space that'll happen along Bell Field. On the right hand.
And another thing to note here is, this contextual podium condition that exists here that Theo mentioned at the southwest side of the site, that also exists here along 5th as well.
Correct, yep.
And then, those two things are kind of different because of the grade change difference we mentioned before. So one of the ways we're doing that is proposing this porch, this terrace in the middle zone to be a transitional area that we really think activates the public realm facing Madison. So we really think that this frontage to Madison can really be a nice urban space and really play off of the things that are happening across the south side of Madison in a good way, this public open space that you see here in the foreground. By creating a nice, strong boulevard with a sidewalk, and that street's just been reconfigured and reconstructed, we will really see a public realm improvement. Additionally to that, we've also intentionally located a step back at the upper level above this podium condition here on the south side with a southern facing terrace at that level 2 space, and then this lower deck, this lower porch again at the level 1.
When you say porch, you mean something that you can walk onto the sidewalk, is that what you mean?
There won't be, because of the grade change, there actually can't be direct access to the sidewalk from that space.
We have other imagery that explain it.
Yeah, we're going to get a little more into it in a few slides. Yep. So if you want to talk about some of the materiality.
Yeah. So here we are now down at pedestrian level looking at the building. This is the corner of Madison and 4th, and we're looking at, in this corner, adding a lot of brick and glass to this corner to really start to activate that, that public amenity. So, you know, the majority of that is parking, but right along the front-facing facades, we're going to try to activate those spaces with a lot of glass and some really nice amenities. And then
one of the things we're replicating is some of the things that go on throughout the neighborhoods that make up the core part of Ann Arbor is you have these nice planting zones on the inner side of the sidewalk, and then you have a really strong boulevard on the outside of the sidewalk. We want to build upon that success that these city neighborhoods already have with our proposed density here, and do it even better.
Yeah.
We want to do that public realm even better. So this image, I think, does a good job of saying that. You know, we've elected to do a nice active facade here at this corner and try to activate that as much as possible with the uses inside the buildings.
You mean like a gym or something? You're not talking about something that would interact with the neighborhood, you're talking about
When you're standing on the sidewalk and you need an active, our public realm has an active street facade right next to the sidewalk. And what that means is there's people inside, there's people outside, both things are happening. It's kind of what the porches do on a lot of houses throughout the neighborhoods of the city. They do that well.
We've got glass, so we can't talk to each other.
Yeah, it's an enclosed building, yeah.
So this is a little bit closer up along that corner, just looking at what Neil was talking about with the plantings along the building and then the boulevard between the sidewalk and 4th Avenue. You can see this is where we're really starting to create that dialogue between our building and the building to the left, the brick building that is owned by the University of Michigan. Not trying to replicate it, but just trying to take some of the design language that building has and using it so our building looks like it fits in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and then a very similar image. This is looking westward from the corner of 5th and Madison. It's a little closer in imagery here of this porch, as well as the level 2 terrace above it. What you can see here is there's a pretty significant grade change drop that happens across here, and what we're proposing to do is really plant that in a terraced way right along the sidewalk, and really have an interaction with those folks who would be up on that outdoor space, in this case outdoor space, on level 1, but they're going to have a little bit of privacy above the sidewalk, which we actually think is a good relationship. It's public, it's active, but it's not overtly adjacent to one another. And we think that's appropriate on a street like Madison. And so the Madison side is a little different than the 4th and the 5th sides of the building. And then I think as we move around, we get to 5th.
Yeah, so here we're at the corner of 5th and Madison, and this is what we were talking about. The amount of grade change going up 5th is probably 15 feet just in the length of our building. And so about halfway through where those people are standing and those lights and that awning is, that would be the front door to our project. So that's where people coming from campus, which is to the northeast, would come down 5th and enter the building at that location, as well as prospective students and anybody else who wants to visit.
And then the exit is north of that entrance? The exit to
That
the parking
yes.
exit.
Yeah, that
Correct.
curved up.
Yep.
That's correct. The curb cut that was mentioned as a one-way exit only curb cut is just to the north of that main entry.
Yeah, so here's a better image of this. So that front door is right in the center, and then that exit is just to the right of that.
Yeah. And you can see Fifth, as you guys all know, is a one-way coming south, and it's very steep in this particular location. But our doorway, our main entry, the address of the building will be at this 5th Street address, nearly to the corner, but not exactly at the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice that the top of the brick element here, which we often refer to as the podium of the building, is only 2 stories here, whereas it's 3 stories on the 4th Avenue side. That's because of that grade change. So the top level are equivalent on those 2 facades, but the grade is what's changed.
Yeah.
Could you define podium? I don't know what you mean.
Sure. Brad, do you want to handle that one with respect to how Ann Arbor and the planning department sees the definition of podium?
So the zoning ordinance in Ann Arbor forces the organization of building elements in what some people call a base, middle, top organization. The base being often referred to as the podium on which the tower will sit. They can't have the same footprint. The tower has to step back from the building base so that the base is represented not only in maybe a different material as you see here, but also within a different vertical plane. So you'll notice that the tower portion of the building is set back at least 5 feet by zoning ordinance from the face of the podium or base of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So that podium on the right there is 2 stories, and the rest of the building will be 5 times taller than that.
Yeah, then we're 10 stories on top of that, 11 stories on top of that.
Right. And so maybe go back to the couple slides back for the full image. This one, yeah. So what this does is shows that full description of what Brad just mentioned. You have your podium condition down low, 2 and 3 stories, with grade change. The middle of the building, the body of the building, and then the head of the building, the top. And that's the 12th story there you just see with the darker color, where we intentionally change materials. And you see buildings throughout the course of history that do this. It's anthropomorphic architecture, and it's intentional. It's meant to provide proper scale to a building of this height. Mm-hmm. And buildings 100 years ago that were 12 stories did this very thing in architecture to elegantly scale those pieces. And generally, the top of the building is about 1 story, right? In most cases, and the podium is a little heftier to provide a nice solid base. So I think we're going to take questions at the end. We're almost there.
All right. We just have one more image to show. This is the pedestrian experience along Madison. So to the left of us is Madison Street, to the right of us is our building. And then this kind of shows what we were talking about with the front porch, where it's actually open space. It's obviously enclosed around it where the residents come in and out, but then we've intentionally cut this part of the building away so that there can be this interaction between residents hanging out at that porch, watching the marching band use the new fields, and anybody that's walking by. And then this also shows kind of our terraced approach to landscaping so that we get that nice lush pedestrian experience as they walk up and down.
How long is the porch where it's open?
Porch is, gosh, it's probably 40, 50 feet.
East to west, about 40 or 50 feet.
Yeah.
So this is a preliminary proposal. I don't know if we have another slide or not.
This is it.
Yeah. This, as Brad mentioned in his intro, he was setting this up. This is a preliminary proposal. It has lots of staff review leading up to the Planning Commission and City Council if it progresses that way. So you're seeing the first public version of it here tonight. So we wanted to put the proposal in front of you. And we want to do some Q&A, as we mentioned, right now. And so I think we can just get into that. If there's things we missed, we'd certainly want to give you that information here tonight through the Q&A. And then we have, we can go back to any of these slides as the questions may prompt that. So, yes, let's go over here first.
Were you involved in the standard, any of you?
I don't believe so. This project team was not involved in the
Okay.
standard project.
So, when you went through the comparisons, the buildings you compared to were 3, 4, 5 stories at most?
We weren't really
I don't see
comparing
them.
them. We were putting those up there as adjacent properties that, contextually we looked at and we wanted to understand really well.
Sure.
And
You were implying that they fit in, your building would fit in with those
Yeah, I
buildings?
mean,
not necessarily,
really
no.
not.
We
Your
were-
building would stand out from those buildings.
not
That's
either
the
way.
alternative, right?
Well, I think that's up for every person's interpretation. Yeah, we weren't overtly trying to say we're like them or not like them.
I think it's a little stronger than an interpretation, possibly.
I guess I'm not following what you're saying.
The building is five times higher than the average building that you were showing us. And you're saying that it's fitting into the neighborhood?
Yeah, you can go back.
Let's take a look.
I don't think we're saying anything necessarily. We're saying that we're contextually, the way we're approaching the street is pretty consistent with the good things that are already being done in Ann Arbor. Yes, we know that those buildings are taller than the buildings that are nearby them.
I think we're roughly twice the height of what we're seeing here, so yes.
Yes,
Admittedly,
factually, the
absolutely
dimensions are
tall.
twice as high.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, you're gonna get a lot of opposition from the community because you're violating zoning. There is a zoning process happening. All you have to really do is wait a couple years, see if this building would fit the zoning. You're really trying to jump ahead of the zoning. That does not sit well with me as a neighbor. The other thing is the massing and the height. Like, you've been a little bit cagey. Is this 10 feet, 10 stories, or is it 14 stories? I haven't heard a straight answer on that. But either way, it is more than 2 times the comparison buildings that you have shown the community tonight. And you haven't shown any of the little small houses, like my neighbor's house, that's gonna be completely in the shadow of this. So we just feel that there's some things going on here that really aren't right. I'm sure that if Mr. Moore had this house, had this project developed next to his single-family home, he wouldn't be too happy about it, nor would you next to your single-family home. So you're really coming in, violating zoning, doing something that's completely out of scale, even with the university buildings that you claim you're supporting the university. I actually know the university's policy, and they're completely neutral. They're not supporting your project.
So I do want to make sure we answer. I heard at least one question in there. How tall is the building? We should be able to answer
Yeah.
that. So let's
Very
start with
simply,
that.
the building is 12. The proposal at this time is a 12-story building.
Which side? Which side? Fifth Avenue or
Yeah.
Fourth Avenue?
Yeah, so as measured in the code, it would be a 12-story building. It is 13 stories on the west side, 12 stories on the east side.
And you
So
preface
that is-
that by saying at this time, so it could be more,
It could be, so one of the
so it could
pieces
be
of...
taller even.
I don't. I'll
No,
take that.
no, you go ahead.
I don't expect that.
You don't expect, but you're not
Can
telling
I just
what you
let-
actually know.
No. If I may, please. This is the plan we anticipate submitting to the city formally, should we get to that point. If we were going to change it, we would have another community meeting like this to inform you prior to doing so. So I think it is fair to say that yes, at this time, this is the plan that we expect to submit, and we don't anticipate changing the height. I do want to just quickly address another comment or slash question. We recognize we're not conforming to the current zoning. We are asking for a zoning change, so we are being
Yes,
very
but
upfront
why
about
not
that.
wait 2 years until the city has the time to get the citizen input and finish their process? We don't like it that you're jumping ahead of the pending zoning change.
Well, and Brad, you may want to take some of that, but I will say that we do believe we're in keeping with the latest vision of the city and of the master
Well,
plan.
can I just say this? So you're well aware of what Subtext did, correct, prior?
Yes.
And you know the height of that? And you
Yes.
know the outcome of what the council or planning said, if you remember those, too tall.
Well, it never got to planning or council.
It was too massive, the percentage was too big, they wanted you to come down. It never came back in. I think they lessened it once, but it was still on a lot of,
That house
Council.
never made it past the design review board.
correct, but that was the big part, it was the height. And
Yeah,
now
Alex
you're
did
at
more.
that and taller, so I'm thinking, you're kind of fighting something that was tried to already fought and didn't really get too far. So that's one of my, I'm just wondering why you would go in it much more than 12 and not something that planning may say, okay, it's a little more tasteful than, that's all.
So the answer on the timing is the property is for sale now, and they have a sales agreement now. There's no guarantee that that property will be as for sale in 2 years. So it's a function of the arrangement with the seller and the buyer.
The property has the lowest quality housing in a floodplain. It's probably gonna be for sale in 2 years. Of that neighborhood.
I've got one more question. So if I'm a neighbor to the north, which I'm not quite there, but I'm close, what is the setback, side setback for those houses? I know that number gets smaller as the building goes higher. So currently, at 12 stories, you should know this, what's the proper setback from that building to the neighbor's property?
So if we had the zoning that we're requesting, the setback would be 15 feet.
At 12 stories?
Yeah.
As a requirement, you said proper, as a requirement, it's 15 feet.
Okay.
So
Yes,
you're
yes, sir, let's go to this chart.
So you are referring to some sort of zoning. Is this a zoning of your own making, or
No, this
what
is the-
zoning? Because it's certainly current zoning, you're violating right and left.
We're seeking to rezone so that we don't violate. So Brad, you want to talk about the zoning classification we're seeking and its attributes?
So the zoning is an existing zoning. It's a D1 zoning, and it comes. And we're proposing that. So all the D1 and D2 zonings in the city don't just have that zoning. They also come with overlays. There are 2 overlays in the D1 and the D2 zoning. There's a character area overlay and a street frontage overlay. So the proposed rezoning would be D1 with Midtown character overlay and secondary street frontage.
Yeah, but it's just something that you devise to fit your needs. It's not something that the city has had any input on, the city planners or all the people who are working on the comprehensive plan, and all the people who will write the zoning laws based on that. So you shortcut that. And so just to have a second question, and that is, so you see that there is, you're stepping into a firestone for the neighbors, but you're also stepping into a firestone with respect to the city, because while the project just a year ago was not viewed favorably, but wasn't completely reviewed, that is true. But the Moravian 10 years ago or more was completely reviewed, and that is pretty much a copy of what you are proposing here. So that, with the same zoning restrictions that are still in effect today, that proposal was voted down by City Council and And so my question therefore is, how is this project different with respect to the Moravian, and most importantly, what aspects of this project provides a public benefit that is clearly stated in the laws of the city that the project has to satisfy to be a PUD. And so it has to be up and beyond what the Moravian had. So what are the differences of more public benefit?
Let's tackle a couple of those things first. Let us know if we don't fully answer your question. We'll come back to any pieces we missed. So it's not a PUD. We are not seeking a PUD as prior projects.
When you're violating zoning, that's the same thing.
We're not violating zoning.
It's
We're asking.
by another name. Okay, fine.
We're asking
Answer.
for a rezoning. We are not seeking a PUD, and we are not going to violate current zoning. That is factual.
And we don't have the Moravian plan. We were not involved in the Moravian. We don't.
You were, I remember you from 15
I
years
had
ago.
nothing to do with the
Oh, no,
Moravian.
you were at all those meetings.
That's
I
not
remember
true.
you.
That's not
I
true.
remember you.
Mr.
It
Mr.
doesn't matter.
Betzold was a civil engineer for both, but I had nothing to
It
do with
doesn't
it.
matter who the faces were, but the building looks exactly the same.
the building the project looks exactly the same. It was highly opposed by the people in the neighborhood, and the city voted it down. Why are you simply presenting the same thing 10 years later that had so much opposition and you failed?
Yeah. So contextually, some things have changed in 15 years. There's a lot of demand for housing in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as you know. You live here. There's a tremendous opportunity, I think, and that's why I like working on these projects, for good city building. Now, that means change. We hear you. It's changed, no doubt about it. But what's the right kind of change is the question at hand. Is a rezoning appropriate for this scale of project? I think in 15 years, the demand for housing in Ann Arbor has changed dramatically. There are people that can't live here out of cost. So a couple of things to build off this gentleman's question and try to answer it fully is the master plan calls for more density. And the vision going forward, we believe, is for more density in this area and really in a lot of other places in the city because of that demand to live here. People want to live here, and they can't right now because of cost, and supply isn't meeting the demand. So, we think that eventually much of the city is going to be upzoned to this D1 classification, which is all the way up to 180 feet. We think our proposal is meeting the needs. It's delivering at a time when when the land is for sale and there's a buyer, and we're proposing 130 feet at the presently, and to do that, we're rezoning. So.
But you're pretending that families are going to live in this building. That's disingenuous. This is clearly a student apartment building. What will you be charging the students for a one-bedroom apartment in this building?
Sure. I think the question is the price points of rent for the demographic that's being sought as renters. So, do you guys want to?
Can you please confirm that the demographic is University of Michigan students?
Yes, that is the
Okay,
primary.
what will you be charging for the units? Because when I see these buildings go up all around Ann Arbor, the rents are astronomically high. Actually, what you're doing is you're tearing down affordable housing in the houses that are there, and then you're making expensive housing in these high-rises. So please do not pretend that you're meeting a housing need. You're taking away affordable housing.
That's a viewpoint. When you
Is
supply
that
more,
true?
You're
saying it's a point.
How many
Do you agree?
I don't agree. I happen to not agree. I think when you supply more housing, you meet a demand, and
More
you actually lower the
housing
housing
at
price.
much higher rates? Is that what you're agreeing that you're doing?
I would say that I've worked on a lot of these projects in college towns.
Just $3,000 apartments. Anything you look at is 300 square foot is costing anybody that's going to rent those
Yeah.
$2,200. Now they'll advertise it as $1,800. Yeah, that's for a room that has 3 bedrooms in it, which is actually $4,000. They can never meet. They can't build that and meet what those single family houses are. You can't do it.
Yeah, you're
So
actually
it's just,
taking
they can
away
tell you
the
all
kind
they
of
want.
housing
Can't
you
do
say
it.
that you're providing.
Can't do it.
And please speak to the price points of the units.
All right, let's do that, and then we'll go to another question. Actually, why don't we come back? We're definitely going to come back to that.
We'll pull up. We have our.
At a preliminary stage, they have a range, and they're getting that
I can
up.
speak to
I'm going to come to you next, but this gentleman's had his hand up for quite a while.
Let me answer that question.
Sure.
So, again, this is preliminary, but I think we mentioned before, we have roughly 200 units, about 670 bedrooms. You're correct in that, many of those configurations do charge by the bedroom. That's so an individual student can only be responsible for his bedroom, his share of the common area, and he doesn't have to be responsible, him or her, for their roommates. And it actually is, I'm not going to call it capital A affordable housing, but it is a way to provide housing to folks who can come and pay for their own space. So just on average, we have, I'll say the mix, we have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and 5 bedrooms. So, a really diverse mix. And the average rental rate that is proposed today is about $1,750 per bedroom space. The 1 bedrooms are more than that.
Now, what are they?
They're projected right now to be around $2,500. You're right. And then the
Right now in a house, you're paying $1,100 for a bed, and they're paying $1,700. It's just,
It absolutely is a higher rent than the homes that are there today. Now, we're providing housing for 670 people. I think the site provides housing for 20 people today. So that's
No
really,
way more than 20. Way more.
well, we don't have, do you have
What is
the-
it, 8 parcels or 10 parcels?
It's 8 parcels.
You may be right, and I'll take that back, 'cause I know that, let us get that, we'll get that answer for you.
And by bringing in a higher density into this, acre property, the goal is, and I think that's why the city is moving forward with this new land use plan, is to pull the students out of the existing neighborhoods and into more condensed areas, allowing those areas to be redeveloped without students in them for the residents that want to live in Ann Arbor in a more affordable nature. Bringing those students out of those light properties that we're redeveloping so they can be redeveloped for people that live and work near Ann Arbor.
Wait,
that's
I
the
don't
thesis.
understand. Can you explain that better?
Yes, so when we bring 650 beds to this location here, those residents have to come from somewhere. They are most likely going to be students at the University of Michigan. So with these new buildings being built throughout Ann Arbor would like to see those students come to these buildings, live in these buildings, go to school, and those areas that they're leaving, those homes that look like the homes that are on this property now, they're going back into the housing inventory for Ann Arbor, for people that want to live here.
I'm sorry, but you're degrading the surrounding neighborhood. You're putting those homes to the north in the
No,
shadow
I'm-
of this loomer. So
I'm
it's not
speaking
like a
about
family
these
is going to move in and
Wait.
take those houses. No way.
You can't deny that a 13-story building, whatever it's gonna be, isn't gonna cast a shadow on all those other houses and they'll be living next to the projects at that point. And they won't have a view of the marching band and any of the other things that are, it will bring the neighborhood down.
Yeah, you're degrading the neighborhood.
No doubt about it, there's gonna be a tall building there, there will be a shadow, and those folks will live near a building that's taller than theirs. So, gentlemen in the back.
Thank you. My name's Zach. I lived at 551 South 4th Ave for 4 years. I was 4th Ave. I was displaced because my landlord didn't offer me a lease room. And this is one of the buildings that would be torn down. I found a place to live. I'm not bitter. I'll tell you why. Because you can actually walk around the site and see just tremendous mold on the buildings. There's mold inside the buildings as well. I lived on the building that's has a little industrial area underneath it, and only 4 studio apartments above it. Tiny spaces. Rent $1,300 a month for just, I couldn't fit all my stuff in the space that I had, and I don't have a lot of stuff. So my question is, if you can go up to 180 feet, why don't you? You know, I only half support this project right now. I'm looking forward to hear more about it. If you went up to 180 feet, I'd be more inclined to fall in love with this project. The other comment that I have is the people that live right on that block between 4th and 5th and up to Packard, those are all rental houses. Now I know you might have some people across the street, across 5th, no? They're not all rental houses?
No, they're not at all.
Okay.
There's a lot of people in our generation who live there.
Okay. All right, I'll take your word for it. I mean, you know, I just never saw them on that block. I saw them across the street, across 5th. But I saw all the signs on like the houses. I walked up and down those streets that all had rental signs. So, you know, maybe people from your generation own those houses.
Well, I can say we own a house with 2 apartments and then we live in one, we rent one out.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to answer Zach's question.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
for the question. Nice,
Appreciate it.
nice to meet you. And then we'll come over here. Actually, Zach, before we answer your question, I want to go back to the previous question. 23 units on the site currently, around 40 bed spaces that are rented. So
Yes,
Zach,
so another aspect to this is, yes, there is mold on some of the buildings, no question. And it's because of a lack of investment. Why is there lack of investment? Because of the neighborhood is under assault from people who are not sticking to the zoning requirements, and therefore people cannot rely on zoning to protect their property. The people who own these have no motivation to invest in it because of exactly what you are doing. So the minute you adhere to the laws that are currently effective in the city and publicize that, there will be investment, because these are, as you also figured out, they are close to downtown. Yes, you can make a nice profit if you invest in these properties, but not if you don't. If at any minute the carpet get pulled out from under you.
I mean, the problem is those properties got consolidated into 8.
Miss, can I
and
answer
that
Zach's
happened.
question first?
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So you're right in that the zoning that we are proposing to be rezoned to allows for 180 feet. We're roughly 130 feet, so we are below what would be allowed if we get rezoned. We've studied both and certainly have contemplated 180 feet. That is a different construction type. It will require us to be all concrete. The construction type that we're proposing at the moment, and there are other buildings in town that are building this type of construction type in this 12 to 13 story range, has the podium that we've talked about built out of concrete, and the building above built out of steel, cold form steel. It's a lower price point, and I can tell you one of our goals is to be at a lower rental rate. We're not saying it's low. We recognize that to build this type of product in this location, these are relatively high rental rates, but we can tell you that they're lower. The rents we have pegged today are lower than the new high-rises that you're seeing recently built to the east of us, right, on the other side of campus, and they're absolutely lower than what other developers are projecting for their buildings on that side of campus, because you're seeing 20-story buildings, et cetera, and they are significantly more expensive. So that's why we've settled in on 13 stories. I also will say, it is, it's not 17 or 18 stories, so it is somewhat of a transition between the 5-6 stories and then the 18, 19-story buildings that you're seeing that could be allowed under this this new zoning. And I will also say there is a chance that, and I'm sure you're very close to this, that these properties that we're talking about to the north will all be rezoned to allow for 180 feet.
I think you're making a statement about zoning. Let the process play out.
I said there's a chance that that's going to happen.
But there's a chance that we
Well,
could
there's a
be-
chance that they're going to
there's a
give us a
chance-
rezoning, and there's a chance they're not.
There's a chance that they could say,
There's
make
a
it
chance
all
we're going to get our
even-
rezoning, and there's a chance we're not.
Yeah, so, but you're talking as if you've already got it in
No.
the pocket.
No. Please don't be mistaken. Please don't be
Okay,
mistaken.
well,
We're
I
not
just
here.
want anyone
If we
who's-
were doing that, we wouldn't be here.
Okay, well, I just.
We understand that what we are proposing is not allowed under the current zoning.
Okay, and I
If the
think-
current zoning sticks, we won't be building it.
And
It's
it
that
should also
simple.
it also should be stated that you're not really committed to anything you represent today about the rentals. I know from how these projects go down, what you say tonight about what the rents are gonna be, they're high, but when the students actually come to sign their leases, these rents are gonna be a lot higher than what you're representing tonight. I just think it should be really clear for anyone who's listening in the outside of the city, external to the meeting, that you are not helping with the problem of unaffordable student housing. It's just more par for the course.
So what you're saying is an allegation with no foundation.
Well,
You're accusing him of the very thing you're doing.
No, he's already said what the rentals are. What did you say a 1-bedroom will cost? That didn't sound affordable to me. $2,500 for a 1-bedroom? Who's to say that's not going to be $3,000 later? There's always creep in these rents. I know that. That's just the pattern. That's not
What I
like
can state
a
is
weird
that-
allegation.
What I can state is that's the rental rate that we believe would be market today if the building were built. And that is how we are
What she's
looking at
saying
it.
is what we've seen over and over again and what you're planning.
Well, if you allow more
Which is-
supply, rents will go down, because that's how it works.
Well,
no,
it
that's not
hasn't
how it
really
works.
I disagree with you.
It hasn't
Well,
really worked.
we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
So
one.
do you just think that if more and more supply is built, but the university enrollment stays generally flat or grows slightly, but there are thousands of beds built, do you think rents will not go
You're
down?
going to compete in each other. You're going to basically flood the market, and things are going to have to come down.
Yeah.
To be competitive for you guys.
They will come down. We've seen
They
it
have to be
happen.
competitive.
We've seen it
Because
happen.
you can't. You're going to be fighting.
The
each
more
other.
that gets built,
Yeah.
the rents will come down. And we have to prepare for that. So when we look at our projections, we do base case scenario, we do upside scenario, we do downside scenario.
Okay.
There are a lot of units planned for this market. I'm sure you're aware of
Now I
that.
want to get to a few other people's questions, so I'm going to try to keep this in mind. This woman has been waiting a long time.
I don't know if I missed a slide. I want to pivot to something really close to detail, which is what was the drop off pickup kind of accommodation? And the reason I'm asking this, and this is relevant to Brad, the yard is like blocking bike lanes constantly, and I can't remember if there's a bike lane on Fifth, but if you're going down my bike block, if you're going down Fifth and you're accelerating down the hill and there's like cars everywhere, I know that they discourage some of that, and I guess I'm sort of praying that something like this will have an accommodation for a car to get out of the way, because it feels like you're close to campus, and certainly when like 100 years ago when I was in college, I regularly walked these distances, but it's shocking how many like Ubers and DoorDashes are like, for instance, blocking bike lanes in the yard. I'm curious, maybe Brad, do you know, or do you?
Well,
I mean,
I'll just say first off, yes, cars clunk up those spaces and make it really kind of unlivable in those ways. So our intentionally, as I alluded to just briefly earlier in the presentation, Brad's tall enough to point to this.
So what street is that?
It's not a street, that's under the building.
Well, that's Fourth.
Yeah.
Coming off of Fourth.
Wait, is a DoorDash person gonna get pulled in
Yeah,
there?
this is going to be an open area where all those deliveries, rideshare, Uber, Lyft, all of that will come off the street.
Pull out of the stream of traffic along here.
Okay. I knew you had mentioned it. I just.
Yeah, it's helpful to point out.
Well, no, I'm saying that the cars get in the way of the bikes. That's why they're a hazard. From my
Generally, the
perspective.
goal here is to get the cars out of the way so the street can function as intended, which is to have the bike lanes, which by the way exist on all three streets, function appropriately. So in all three streets, we are trying to get as much traffic off of there as possible. And the parking stalls will still be there. So there's no, the zones are properly defined. The driving zone, the bike lane, and then the parking zone. And there's no ambiguity between that, and then we're moving all of the deliveries through the building to make those things happen. That stopping that you're talking about happens on private property, not on public property.
There's a bad setup for bikes.
Yeah.
Right
It's just
now,
like
you see it.
zooming.
You see it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's an accident waiting to happen. No doubt.
Brad, do you know how, or maybe I should direct it to you necessarily. Where's the nearest D line? Like how far away is the nearest area of D1 zoning? Like right now, I'm just curious.
It would be either the standard, that Main Street William intersection, or the William Fifth intersection.
All right, there was a couple other hands. Yes, miss, and I'll come back.
I want to speak to affordability, and also I want to say I appreciate your efforts to get the deliveries off the street. The deliveries for the standard are all parking in my driveway. Okay, they have no accommodation for deliveries as far as I can tell, and it's constant. But on affordability, I've heard no mention of parking. I think if you have no parking, you will have affordability, because nobody needs a car right there if you want this to be affordable, and if it's for students. So what is your plan in terms of how much you're going to charge everybody for a parking space and who you're going to bring in? Because the students who can afford cars are not the ones who need the affordable housing, okay?
Thank you for the question. I'll address the first part. So the first part is how much parking. We didn't allude to that, so thank you for bringing it up. We have a parking ratio here that's about between 15 and 20% per bed. So what that means is that only 15 to 20% of the residents of this building will have a parking stall. So that's a very low number. Many other projects have a higher number than that, and you've probably seen that proposed elsewhere and built elsewhere. With respect to the decoupled arrangement of how parking is paid for,
We're projecting about $200 per month for the parking, but as Neil said, 80+% of the residents will not have cars because there are no parking spaces available for them.
that also, the less parking you build, the more the project works financially, and it actually helps lower the rent price of the apartments
that's my
themselves.
point.
Yes, parking is very expensive to build, and I as a designer like doing less of it. It makes my job easier and for a better building.
What, I understand there's been some change in what the city requires with parking. Where are we now in terms of that requirement?
Sure, yeah, has been a change, you're absolutely right. And Brad, do you want to summarize the recent change of the parking minimums that the city requires?
There is none. Correct.
No requirement?
No
Yeah,
parking.
the city actually isn't requiring private developers to meet a minimum anymore. They used to, and they don't anymore. So they've moved in the direction of I think, what you were mentioning here in your commentary is that we're not going to ask them, you can build parking if so you choose. We're not going to require you to build any minimum amount.
And providing parking on site too as well alleviates our residents, because some of our residents will have parking, we think around 15% inside on our property, not trying to look into the parking in the neighborhood or on campus or nearby,
The
keeping them.
parking is all in the basement or what?
It's on the
Two
on the
levels.
lowest two levels of the building,
Okay.
level 1 and what I call the level P1 or the basement.
Is any of that below ground level? I
Only
guess
the
not,
only the east side of the basement level is below grade.
because it's a flood zone.
Correct. Yep. We can't go very deep. This is much of the site is in that flood zone. Yes, sir.
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to provide an example of like a situation. I'm a renter. I live away from downtown, away from campus, Stadium Pauline. So in my mind, adding these, I forget offhand how many beds you said the project would include, by adding denser housing closer to campus, would provide a place for students, so students wouldn't have to live in my complex necessarily. Not that would be a bad thing, but there's families that live in my complex as well. There's a diverse amount. It boils down to what I'm trying to say is I have less chance of being displaced if there's more housing catering to students where it is needed and where they want to live. My other point of confusion is my friend across the table here has repeatedly said to let the zoning play out, and I'm just really confused because I thought we were supposed to pause the plan and not let the zoning play out. That's it.
Sure. That's more a comment than a question.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right. The gentleman in the back, he hasn't had the
Sure.
opportunity.
Just a question about the zoning. I was confused by what Mr. Morris said. So, if I'm looking at the map correctly, some of the properties are zoned M1,
There's one property that currently is existing in.
and then the others are R4C,
Correct.
and then you're going to combine them
Correct.
and then ask for a D1 designation
With
with the
the midtown overlay and the secondary street frontage.
Okay, great.
So
That was my
since there is some, you are the better person to answer this clearly, but in terms of zoning, the current zoning is still in effect. Is
It
that
is,
correct? Yes.
yeah, and he's alluding to the fact that I'm on the planning commission.
Yeah.
But what you are getting to is at any time, anybody in the city can request rezoning. That's just how the zoning
Sure,
code
if there
works.
is a public benefit.
No,
No, for PUD you need a public benefit.
they're not requesting a PUD.
Well, that's just a play on words.
That's a play on words.
It's not a play on
That-
words. There are actual
Well,
zoning
So,
designations.
because exactly the same building was proposed 15
I
years
believe-
ago.
I
And
believe-
what did they request?
You-
They
he is
requested a
correct.
PUD.
He is correct
Yeah.
that this site, those properties bounded by those two streets have a long history in the city. Mr. Moore is also correct, it never came to the planning table. It
The
came-
Moravian did. You were not here yet. No, you were not
I
on the
was
planning
I
commission.
was not saying anything incorrect, I was talking about what Mr. Moore said about the last development.
Yeah,
the
but I'm
subtext.
talking about the Moravian, which is a carbon copy of this.
I'm trying to speak, but you're trying to speak for me.
Okay, well, I'm just
So-
correcting you.
No, you're not, because I didn't say anything incorrect. So the last developer didn't make it because they just did a pre-PUD, which is what we asked, so that we can get some of these things out into the open. So it never did actually come before the planning commission for consideration, before the petitioner withdrew it. So the other thing that I'm, one, it sounds like your parking still is a little high. I appreciated your answer about the height, because that would be my question at the planning table, is why not go fully up? And so I think that's a really good answer. The other thing that there was concern about was the floodplain. So the floodplain. So how are you sort of mitigating that? But it looks like it's just at one corner of your property, and so you're only putting parking in that space.
Yeah, the tires could get wet in a 100-year flood.
Okay.
We are at the very fringe of the floodplain, which means the depth of the floodwaters is 6 inches tall in places and maybe a foot tall in places. So the only things that would be subject to the inundation would be the parking levels, not anybody's residence or not any of the councils.
Sure. And then you're gonna, how are you dealing with your either stormwater and all of that mitigation, because none of that exists today on the site.
Right.
So you're actually gonna be bringing in, dealing with that to sort of help deal with rain and water as it moves throughout the site.
Stormwater will be contained in underground detention on the site. So,
And will it be under the parking lot?
correct.
Yeah, it's gonna be buried, and it's an opportunity to clean up what otherwise is a kind of an issue, a flood issue, and we are structuring, and the project is required to invest in stormwater management. It will make the site better than it is today with respect to flooding and all the water that could potentially, in a 100-year event or something like that, be a problem. So it will be an improvement upon that.
And then my other question would be, do you anticipate tearing up Madison for utility work? Because it has just been resurfaced.
To be determined. We're hoping not.
Okay.
But again, that's one of the many myriad of details that has to be worked out as the thing moves forward.
Yeah, because I just think that for me is something that I'm surprised by, is how many times we tear up a road. And I recognize that the city only pays for it once, and so then they pass the cost on to the developer. But certainly, as the university is about to demo those 51 units that is in the neighborhood, like if there's any chance for stuff to happen while other things are happening, so that you don't have to tear up the road that looks really great right now, because they just resurfaced it, repainted it, restriped it, and it would just be a loss to have to see that road sort of ripped up again because utility has to come into that road. So that was more just a comment, an
You're
observation.
suggesting it goes up in different sequences.
I'm just saying, if you all can do it, like time it so that it only happens once, if it has to be done at all. But as Mr. Moore indicated, that's a to be determined. Thank you.
Yeah, the 100-year flood that you're referring to, well, it actually happened a few weeks ago. It happened earlier this year. It happened last year, the year before. We have photographs of just how inundated that corner is. It's the whole, I'd say it's half the footprint of your building with marshy qualities in the other half. So to just imply that there's just a little corner that might be a bit wet, no, you're building in a floodplain, and that's why the university made Elbow Field where it is, didn't put a big building there. Let me just finish.
the university elected right adjacent to make that the marching band practice area because they realized it shouldn't even be a parking lot, that it is within the Allen Creek floodplain, and this is well documented, and this is going to become a matter that comes to the fore. You know, you can say you're going to mitigate that, but
we will be abiding by all floodplain ordinances, and the most kind of meaningful piece of that, I would say, is that you can't have occupiable space within a floodplain. Mainly units and other, we will not have that.
yeah, but
So-
you said tires
so
will get wet.
We can have parking in floodplain, and that's allowed.
Currently, there are beds.
So right now, there are units, there are people sleeping in the floodplain that you're speaking of. We're gonna be improving that.
Tires.
And we're
not
gonna
such a
be,
big concern.
and we're gonna be abiding by all current ordinances, where right now, what's existed there is grandfather. It abides by 0 ordinances as it relates to floodplain and condition and maintenance. We've heard of mold, et cetera, so just wanna point that out. There will be no request for variances around floodplain ordinances.
Scott, any other clarifications on what a 100-year floodplain is? We know that that's a technical term, so.
Yes, it is a technical term. It's the flood event that has a 1% chance of happening in any given year.
Yeah.
Now, yes, I will not dispute that they seem to be happening more and more often. I mean, I think we all have seen that. But it's not a 100-year floodplain. It's a 1% event. And we didn't have a 100-year flood anytime recently, because I did this site here, and this table would be underwater in the 100-year floodplain. The floodplain is 2.5 feet deep in this building.
Well, you should see the photographs that I have of cars on Madison.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to point out, we have the room till 2 minutes ago. So we're at time exactly. Do you have one last question?
Oh, just related to the flooding, because I lived on the site for 4 years, and there's a parking lot in the middle of all those buildings right now, and all the time I lived there, there was no cars that had to be relocated because of flooding. There were no cars that floated away from the street or anything like that. So I hope that will alleviate some of your fears.
I've lived there for 35 years,
Where?
and I've seen on South Fifth Avenue,
Okay.
across from this site. And I have seen
lived on the
countless
site for
times.
4
I've
years.
seen countless times when cars are plowing through the water.
Oh,
plowing through the water.
Like
My
that
father-in-law was the
happens
vice president of Fingerly Lumber, and he worked in that building that's on the east side. And it would flood every 5 years or so, and water would come in the front door. So
We gotta wrap up the meeting because we're committed to get out of the room. But I wanted to say, on the postcard is an email address from my office. If you have any questions or comments you think of after you leave tonight, email them to my office. We'll include them in the report.
And then, before we adjourn, we do have to get out of the room, but if anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question, now would be the time, and we can wrap up right after that. Any takers on that? Okay, just thought I'd ask to be sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you all.